In today's video, we're actually going to start off by talking a little bit about Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce's relationship, how they started, how they fell in love. I'm totally kidding. What kind of channel do you think this is? I'm a huge Taylor Swift fan, or at least I was when she started. But even I have gotten extremely fatigued hearing about Taylor Swift, although I guess me talking about her is technically giving Taylor Swift even more attention. But anyways, if that's what you're looking for, you clearly arrived at the incorrect channel, because today we're going to be looking at a very subjective list, and potentially I guess could be controversial depending on your personal opinion, but we're going to be counting down the top 5 Batman action figures from McFarlane thus far. And I know what most of you guys are thinking: Angel, McFarlane has made thousands of Batman action figures up to this point. How are you ever going to narrow it down to a top 5? Why didn't you do a top 10? Well, I just don't have the patience for a top 10. Honestly, I put every ounce of effort and like a bunch of sweat and tears into just a top 5. I can only imagine what it would take to do a top 10. So this is going to be the top 5 best Batman action figures from McFarlane as of this point. And clearly we all have our own different list. We all have our own top favorite Batman action figures. So let me know down below in the comment section. Give me your top 5. Or if you want to just narrow it down to your favorite Batman action figure from McFarlane, let me know down below. Now, I do have some runner-up slash honorable mentions. There were some Batman action figures that almost made the list, but I decided to keep them off just because there's quite a bit of competition. The first one that I wanted to throw out there was the 1000s comic book, Detective Comic Books Batman, which just narrowly missed out. By the way, this is my stand-in in my display. I think it's not necessarily the most iconic, but I think it's the closest to a perfect representation of not even like a modern day Batman, just in general what a Batman should kind of look like. It doesn't have the big bulking body that we've seen recently. It's a little sleek, it's slender, not too muscular. It came with just enough accessories, but I think as soon as it arrived, it was almost outdated in terms of its articulation and the cape molding and things of that nature. It kind of fell apart really quickly, so I decided to leave it off. The other big one is the Dark Knight Returns Batman, which is another source material that I absolutely love. I do have this one in my display as well. I picked up the entire wave. I absolutely love this figure. The only problem, and look, I love the sculpt work, the source material, the head sculpt I think is phenomenal. The paintwork is just, you know, it's exactly what you'd expect from a $20 collectible, but the body mold is just severely outdated, or at least the technology that McFarlane uses here. He's big, he's you know, really thick as it is. You know, the articulation is going to be limited, but he decided to go with like single jointed elbows. The head movement isn't very good. He can't look up and down as well as I think he should be able to. So it's just a very, very limited figure in terms of articulation. I think it's a really cool, neat figure to have in your display, but I don't necessarily think it's in top 5 contention. We also have the Year 2 Batman in here. I actually really love the paint job that this figure got. Very accurate to the comic book, to its source material. But I'll be brutally honest, I'm not sure if I'm quite there with McFarlane action figures having a cloth cape. I just prefer kind of like a cape that's swaying in the wind or something like that, something more iconic to what we usually get from McFarlane. On top of that, the head sculpt was pretty good in the body mold overall, but I feel like as time has gone by, I think McFarlane has kind of outdone himself in terms of the body molds that he's offered us. So let's get straight into it. Let's not waste any more time with the runner-ups. Let's get straight into number 5, where we have the Hellbat action figure, which is a figure that was released in the first year of McFarlane acquiring the DC Multiverse line. He was still trying to figure out exactly what the marquee was going to be or what the staple was going to be for that line, and I think this is a perfect example of what he was going with. He was just trying to be flashy. He was trying to appeal to as many people as he possibly could because it was the first year. And I really appreciate that. I think the Hellbat figure is one of those iconic staples of the McFarlane DC Multiverse line. It's big, it's bulky, it has a lot of armor to it. But I think the fact that he was willing to take the risk by creating a Hellbat action figure. I mean, if you have read the comic books, this isn't a suit that really gets a lot of attention. And from what I remember, remember, it was a very small comic book run where it was featured. So it's really nice for him to take that risk and to give us a brand new, unique sculpt, which is something that we're not going to really see with the Batman action figures. Usually they're reused, or they have been reused, or they're going to be reused quite often. Whereas in this particular figure, I think had one repaint. I think it was like a golden repaint, and there might have been one other repaint, but it wasn't like a reuse of the body mold. It was just a flat out repaint, and I think it was like a store exclusive if you wanted to pick it up or not. It might have been a little bit more limited, but we're going with the original Hellbat action figure. Great sculpt work, big, you know, like I said, armored, and I think it became a really iconic figure for the DC Multiverse line. That is our number 5. At our 4th spot, I decided to put the Hush Batman action figure. It does not get better than a just fantastic classic Jim Lee style action figure. We also received a Superman and a few other figures from that universe. But this particular Batman, like I said, I love the body molding, love the cape. The face sculpt is fantastic. There is a variant, and I think most people tend to gravitate towards the blue variant, although that one is a little bit harder to find. And I think the price point is much, much higher. I think it's worth like 3 times what the regular black and gray one is worth. And for good reason. It's a phenomenal design, and I think deserves the attention. But overall, it's a fantastic figure. As I mentioned, one of the most iconic comic book runs, and the fact that we've gotten multiple characters. I mentioned already the Superman that we got. I believe this is like the second version of Superman from the Hush universe. We have the Batman, and then we had the actual Hush action figure released as well. And hopefully they continue to expand. They give us more action figures from that particular comic book run. But as I said, I think this is a very iconic look for Batman. A lot of people tend to think that this may be like the favorite body mold when it comes down to Batman. It's definitely up there. And as I said, if you want to pick it up, it's still widely available, the regular release. So if you guys want to pick that one up, it's still going for about like $20. You might find it on sale for a little bit under. Like I mentioned, the blue variant might be the one that's more difficult to find, but still a phenomenal figure. Definitely worth the pickup if you guys are interested. So that is our 4th spot. Moving on to the 3rd spot on our list, we have the Rebirth Batman, and I completely get it. I think the Rebirth era or the comic book era is probably one of the most hated. Probably a lot of people didn't really love the retelling of a lot of these storylines. They didn't love the designs, they didn't love the storylines, and so on and so forth. And so I think it's definitely one of those that gets hate, but for the wrong reasons, because of its source material, but not really because of the figure being bad for any reason. I actually love the design. I love the sleeker body mold from that Rebirth era. And even though in general they didn't really have the best storylines, there are some great comic book runs from the Rebirth that I think are really worth checking out. But that aside, I think it's a phenomenal figure. Like I said, it's a really sleek, unique, slender looking Batman, and I really do enjoy that. Not to say that I don't like, you know, the bigger, bulkier body molds from time to time, but I like the fact that McFarlane kept that pretty iconic, sleek design, because I almost feel like from time to time he tends to put his own flair on some of these figures, but he kept that design, and I think it's definitely one that deserves a lot of attention. Another figure that's pretty widely available from the last time that I checked. You don't have to like pay through the nose for this figure, so it's still out there if you want to pick it up. It's a phenomenal figure to have in your display. I don't know if it's going to replace like your go-to Batman per se, like the most classic looking Batman, but I think it's a really cool design. And there are a lot of other figures that he released alongside this Batman that are from the Rebirth universe, so he didn't just kind of do a one-off. He continues to give you Rebirth character, so it's definitely a must pick up, and that is our number 3 spot. Moving on to number 2, where we have the 3 Jokers Batman. This was introduced as one of the newer body molds at the time. It was bigger, bulkier, beefier, but still had the same articulation points that the older Batman action figures had, which was a very interesting move because we saw, for example, the Dark Knight Returns Batman, which had very limited articulation, had the same type of bulk, the same type of girth, but definitely lagged in the articulation. But this particular figure didn't have any of those issues. Now, it's not really the most iconic Batman because it is from a newer comic book series that not everybody has read. It's a phenomenal comic book series, and I highly suggest people tune in to really enjoy a fantastic, DC comic book series. But if you don't really plan on reading it, you can still appreciate it for what it is. It's one of the best McFarlane Batman action figures released to date. As I said, it's not really going to fit in too well with like a DC Classics display or like a Justice League style display, so it won't fit into every single collection. But as I said, it's still an absolutely phenomenal Batman action figure. Without further ado, without wasting any more of your time and more of my saliva, the top spot goes to the Nightfall Batman from McFarlane. Absolutely brilliant action figure, great paint, the same basic articulation that we've been receiving, but I love the body mold on this one. Again, they went away from like the bulkiness, they went away from larger body molds and went with a kind of a sleeker design, very reminiscent of like the Rebirth action figure. But as I said, it's from a very iconic comic book run from like, what was it, the early 90s. I love the cape on this figure. It also doesn't have like an insane amount of action going on, so you can kind of put him in relatively calm poses, but also you can get him in maybe some swinging or grappling poses as well. Obviously there's not going to be, especially if it's hard plastic or even soft plastic, you're not going to be able to get the cape to fit every single scenario or every single pose, but I think this is as close as you can get, and it fits in perfectly with your Bane if you already have them. So there you guys have it. This is our list for our top 5 best Batman action figures from McFarlane thus far. As I said, this is my personal opinion, my personal taste. Let me know down below in the comment section what your top 5 is, or just let me know what your top Batman action figure from McFarlane is. And as always, hit the like button, subscribe, all that good stuff. Thank you guys for tuning in. I'll see you guys in the next one.